to the desert in Dubai, or to the Mediterranean island of Cyprus? Which particular country might be much better suited for your personal emigration journey? The very latest and most comprehensive information as of the year 2025, everything absolutely essential that you truly need to know for making your important decision, you will certainly find out in this detailed video. Hello and welcome. My name is Florian Wilk. I'm the Managing Director of CMC in Larnaca, Cyprus. We also have locations in Madeira, Singapore, Ireland, and Georgia. And of course, we also have many connections with the United Arab Emirates. I personally really enjoy being in Dubai, but also in Abu Dhabi and other Emirates. And time and again, I get questions from interested people and clients. Florian, what would you recommend? From your perspective, what are actually the main points, the pros and cons when I compare the United Arab Emirates with Cyprus? And this video is meant to give you very openly my personal perspective and experience, and directly lay out the pros and cons, the similarities and differences between Dubai and Cyprus. I want to help you make your decision, Of course, I also have my personal preference, which I'll share with you at the end. But of course, I am completely open to any outcome. So I'll start with lifestyle and climate. In the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai, as people often say for short, you obviously have a very intense heat period. That's clear, that's well known. We're in the desert, obviously. In the summer, you mostly stay indoors, of course. But in the winter, it's actually quite pleasant. However, personally, if you fly to the Emirates in January, February, or March, I actually find it a bit too chilly for my taste. So in the summer, it's extremely hot. In the winter, it's pleasantly mild, maybe a little on the cool side. I'd say 5 degrees more in winter, or even 7 or 8 degrees more would actually be perfect. But, well, you can't have everything perfect all the time, so to speak. In Cyprus, it's also the case that we have extreme heat in the summer. Yes, so in July and August, you easily get 35, 37 degrees, sometimes even up to 40 degrees at the peak. So July and August are really very hot months. Otherwise, May and June are very pleasant. September and October are also very pleasant, summery months if you like warm temperatures. Of course, that's not everyone's cup of tea. Otherwise, in November, December, but also in March and April, you have moderate temperatures. It gets a bit milder then. And that's actually also a very nice time. And January and February are actually the cold months in Cyprus. When I say cold, I mean you often still have 20 degrees, so really not much different from Dubai, but sometimes it can drop down to 14, 12, or even 10 degrees or so. I'm always talking about the daytime temperatures. At night, I don't want to talk too much about the weather or climate, but essentially February and January, and then in March it starts to get better again. So January and February are especially a relatively cold, wet season. If you're unlucky, it can even rain for 3 or 4 days in a row. And accordingly, it's always a bit of a matter of luck. You can fly to Cyprus in January and have 20 degrees and a week of sunshine. But you could also have 3, 4, even 5 rainy days in a week if you're unlucky. And it's only 12 degrees during the day. So that's that. To sum it up, Dubai might be a bit too extreme, especially in the summer. I think Cyprus is a good option all year round. And then it really comes down to personal preference. Some people say, I take advantage of the mild temperatures in winter. That's when I feel especially comfortable because it's pleasantly mild. Others say, I want the heat, I like the warmth in summer. And then in winter, I'm in Thailand or Brazil or South Africa to have a nice warm environment all year round. That's a matter of personal taste. When it comes to lifestyle, of course, in Dubai, you have much more. That's obvious. Cyprus isn't exactly a small island, but it still only has just over 1 million inhabitants. The Emirates, of course, have far more residents, far more expats. 80% of the people living there are expats. And naturally, you have a nightlife to match. When it comes to restaurants and the culinary scene in general, I think Cyprus is very well positioned. Of course, it's not on the level of the Emirates. You have much more there. Fine dining options, but when it comes to everyday culinary offerings, if you're looking for restaurants in the mid-range segment, I think Cyprus is very well positioned in that regard. At the end of the day, it's always a matter of personal taste. If you prefer fine dining at a Michelin level, you'll eventually have tried everything in Cyprus. After a while, At some point, you just won't have any more options. In the Emirates, of course, you have much, much more choice. And there you can regularly discover new things again and again. Yes, absolutely. And when it comes to lifestyle in general, especially leisure activities like shopping or certain types of entertainment, of course, in the Emirates, you have a huge range of options. On the other hand, if you take a closer look, Cyprus also offers a lot, but it is not marketed as heavily. Of course, you can. It's always a question of lifestyle. You can also offer a super sports car in Cyprus. It's just not marketed on every corner. Of course, you can just as easily do a parachute jump. In Cyprus, you can water, skiing, golf, playing tennis, hiking in the mountains. You can't do that so well in Dubai, hiking in the desert. So you have a very, very good range of leisure activities in Cyprus, but you often need a second look because it's not as commercialized. The things are not marketed as heavily, and they are, of course, also quite pricey. Completely, completely different. I'll say more about that in a moment. That's the next or the one after next point, or rather. So in short, if you really value nightlife, always having new restaurants, clubs, and so on and so forth, then you'll get much, much more of that in Dubai, of course, at a higher cost than in Cyprus. If you just want to do fine dining every now and then, and otherwise are well served with good mid-range cuisine and maybe go out partying or out on the town from time to time, then you can definitely get your money's worth in Cyprus as well. It's just a different lifestyle. Also in terms of party culture and so on. That's all for now on that topic. Now, another very important area, the second point I want to address, after climate and lifestyle, it's taxes. When it comes to taxes, both countries are very, very attractive, basically. That's just a fact. Of course, the devil is in the details. It's always an individual decision. So here's a note on that at this point. This is actually my main topic, our daily business, that we take care of tax and legal matters, handle such tax setups, manage ongoing bookkeeping, annual financial statements, and so on. And of course, I'm very happy to help with that. If you want, you can go under the video and book a free consultation, and then we can go over your personal setup together. I'm also happy to help you with your decision making because every case is different. And of course, we've gathered 15 years of experience and support in a wide range of areas. So it always makes sense to address your situation individually, of course. So feel free to take advantage of the offer. In the worst case, you'll get a few valuable tips. You'll get some guidance and an assessment of your project, and you'll have invested half an hour. I think that's a very, very fair offer. There's really nothing to lose. And just to give you a rough overview, and maybe also to clear up one or two misunderstandings that often come up in this context. When it comes to corporate tax, Cyprus has a standard rate of 12.5%. Now, there are certain areas like royalties, but also software licenses and patents where the company only pays 2.5% corporate tax. So you'll fall somewhere within this range. A maximum of 12.5%, a minimum of 2.5%. That's the range in Cyprus. In the United Arab Emirates, you have a tax-free allowance, up to 400,000 dirhams, which is about $100,000. After that, you're subject to a 9% corporate tax. Of course, you can optimize in both jurisdictions. In the Emirates, it's common to simply set up multiple companies. Naturally, that comes with costs and administrative effort, of course. In Cyprus, you can sometimes work through foreign companies, but you also need substance in the respective jurisdiction. Obviously, a shell company won't do you any good there. That needs to be stated very clearly. But in any case, there are optimization opportunities in both jurisdictions. And that's why, once again, it comes down to looking at each case individually. It's important because it really does depend on the industry, and it makes a big difference whether, to exaggerate, you're making 50,000 euros profit a year or 50 million euros. So, of course, you need to set up a completely different structure in that case. When it comes to income tax, you have the major advantage in the Emirates that you don't pay any income tax. That might come one day. The Emirates are very dynamic. There's a lot happening there, really a lot. But as of today, you don't have any income tax. That's a huge advantage of the United Arab Emirates, of course. In Cyprus, you have a tax-free allowance, at least 19,500 euros. And then you pay 20, 25, 30, 35% per bracket. From 60,000 euros, it's 35%. Income tax. There's also a 50% income tax discount under certain conditions, which are generally achievable. But it's not zero. What we do in Cyprus is structure the income so that you don't receive a salary, or maybe only a small salary, so that you stay within the tax-free allowance. That makes sense. I think it's pretty logical. And accordingly, you structure things through profit distributions, not through salaries. So every country, every jurisdiction simply requires a different structuring of everything in order to take advantage of the local benefits. So at first glance, Dubai seems much more attractive, but on closer inspection, in most cases, you can structure things so that from a tax perspective, you are just as well off or similarly well off in Cyprus as you would be in the United Arab Emirates. The advantage in Cyprus is that you have the non-dom status, which means, to put it simply, you are exempt from tax on capital gains for 17 years. In the Emirates, you just don't necessarily know what will happen tomorrow. It's just more dynamic. And of course, normally new taxes are introduced or taxes are increased, not the other way around. And of course, that can lead to the situation worsening next year, the year after, or so, to your disadvantage. And in this respect, I personally find this planning security extremely important, especially if I say, maybe I'll buy a property in that country. That's a commitment. If I invest 300, 400, 500,000 euros and buy a property, then of course I want to know that for a certain period, ideally at least 10 years, better yet 15 or 20 years, I can also benefit from the tax advantages. That's exactly what you have in Cyprus. You have 17 years of non-dom status. You get that in black and white from the Ministry of Finance. A huge advantage. In the Emirates, you just don't know. And there are also rumors that an income tax might be introduced. I don't want to dwell on that too much right now. We'll have to wait and see. Time will tell. No one has a crystal ball, but it's certainly a realistic scenario. So that's another very, very important difference. When it comes to tax residency, which is also important to mention, Cyprus has the 60-day rule. That means 60 days a year are enough to be considered tax resident in Cyprus. And it really works. We've had the opportunity to assist with it hundreds of times. In the Emirates, something relatively new has been introduced. It's only been around for 2 or 3 years, the 90-day rule. This means you are required to stay at least 90 days per year in order to become tax resident there. A common and significant misconception in this particular context is that you only truly need to maintain your physical residence permit to fully benefit from the substantial tax advantages, and subsequently to both become and consistently remain a tax resident. In the Emirates, completely wrong. It is often confused. There's a difference between residency status and tax status. I'll say more about that in a moment because there is a very, very crucial difference between the two. Just as a side note, so 60-day rule in Cyprus, 90-day rule in the United Arab Emirates. At the end of the day, there's not that much difference. The real question is where you prefer to be at the end of the day. Taxes also play a role, but do I want to spend 90 days a year in the Emirates, or is it just too hot for me? In the summer, 60 days in Cyprus. Ideally, it's always May and October if you can arrange it, or you just spend the time all at once. 60 days at the beginning of the year in Cyprus. It's nice, mild weather, not much going on. You can focus on work in peace or something like that, and then that's taken care of too. So there are many ways you can handle it, ultimately. Exactly, that's about it for the tax side of things. As I said, feel free to book an appointment for your individual situation. There's no point in listing all the general factors if you tell me about your specific situation. I can give you advice tailored exactly to you, tell you how we can best set things up, and above all, show you all the options. I always find that extremely important. The next point is the cost of living. And that's also a really, really crucial point, actually. Without wanting to go too much into detail, in Cyprus, you generally have very, very fair costs. You can get a 3-room apartment for 1,200 euros a month. You can get a 2-room apartment for 800 euros a month, give or take, furnished with air conditioning, kitchen appliances, everything included, first occupancy, brand new from the developer. In Dubai, it really depends. The market is very diverse. You can rent for similar prices there, but usually only in less attractive districts far away. Then you have to drive half an hour to get anywhere and end up in a ghetto. That's not what you want. If you want a good location, maybe in the marina or perhaps in Business Bay or Creek, then you'll pay accordingly. Then you're quickly looking at $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 or even $5,000. or euros for that matter, since there's not much difference per month. And of course, those are different costs compared to Cyprus, especially if you want a certain standard. On the other hand, you can easily spend 2,000 or 3,000 euros on rent in Limassol, and you also have apartments for 3 million euros in Limassol. Of course, you also have plenty of luxury options in the United Arab Emirates, but on average, rental costs are still quite a bit higher in the Emirates than in Cyprus. At least those are my experiences and what I hear from clients. And generally, for example, if you go out to eat in Cyprus, just the two of you, without alcoholic drinks, maybe with a juice or coffee or something like that, 2 people for lunch or dinner, not fine dining, just a mid-range restaurant, you're looking at 40 to 50 euros. In the Emirates, you're already more likely to be at 100, 120, sometimes even $140 converted. Of course, you can also eat out in the Emirates for $5 if you go to an Indian restaurant, which is what a lot of guest workers do, for example. But that's not really, at least in my personal experience, what expatriates actually and truly use in their daily lives. And at a mid-range restaurant, you're easily paying double that costs in the United Arab Emirates. I often notice with clients who move from Dubai to Cyprus that they're very, very surprised at how inexpensive many things are. It starts with the parking ticket, which only costs 2 or 3 euros for several hours and continues with food prices, rental conditions, or even property purchase prices. Yes, you can buy a 3-room apartment with a balcony for 230,000 euros. With a shared pool, that is a communal pool, a communal sauna, and a communal gym. Yes, it's incredible. Not far from the sea, not exactly walking distance, well, that's always a matter of perspective, but not directly on the waterfront, but right across from it, yes, with a sea view. It really is incredible how affordable some of the properties still are there, especially in Larnaca. Larnaca is still a real insider tip. It's also developing really well right now. And the Emirates have become a bit more expensive. In recent years, at least from what I've observed since COVID, no comparison. So that's just a very, very rough overview. It's a huge area. The cost of living is also very individual, but just to give an overview of how I perceive it. The next point is stability and politics. In my opinion, the political situation in Cyprus is very stable. And there is this cross-party consensus that Cyprus must always remain tax attractive. That's basically a lifeline of Cyprus. We need that. The Cypriot economy needs these tax advantages. That won't change either. As a small Mediterranean island, we have no other option. In the Emirates, of course, they are very dependent on revenue from the oil business. Oil is flowing very well in Abu Dhabi, but apparently not so much in Dubai. That's why they're focusing so much on tourism and want to promote it. It's a major economic factor, of course, for the Emirates. At the end of the day, they are simply different legal systems, different forms of government, and you just can't compare them. It's like night and day. One is a European democracy, an EU member state. The other is just an Arab country, where at the end of the day, the sheikhs have the final say. I'm not trying to criticize that at all, or anything like that. Yeah, that's something everyone has to decide for themselves. But of course, you have a different legal situation in the Emirates than you do in an EU country. Everything has its pros and cons. Many people are critical of the EU, and I think that's allowed too. But a certain, let's say, if you're European yourself, a certain understanding of the mentality, the culture, the legal system is certainly helpful. It's certainly not a bad thing. And in that regard, Cyprus is, of course, fully integrated into Europe. The people are European, they think like Europeans. From my point of view, that's actually a huge advantage. And I always feel very, very comfortable in Cyprus because you have this European culture, this European standard, a very, very important point. I think both jurisdictions are stable, but as I said, they are 2 completely different legal systems. That's all I want to say about that. You can also say it's a part, but I don't want to get political. Then another important point, one last point before my conclusion, namely, I've already hinted at it, immigration and residency, in other words, your residence status. And you need to know, and this is often not communicated, but from my perspective, it's a very crucial point. When you're in the Emirates, then you are a guest, yes, and of course you're not an Emirati citizen, obviously. And then you have to obtain a residence permit, either by getting a freelancer visa, sponsoring yourself through your own company, or by purchasing a property. And then you have your residence permit for 1 year or 2 or 3 or 5 or even 10 years. Residence permit, your residency status. And when that period expires, you have to start the sponsorship process all over again, or register as a freelancer or buy a property. So it's a never-ending situation. Even if you were born there as a non-Emirati and have lived there for decades, you will only, in very, very rare exceptional cases, be granted citizenship. That's important to know. And you are never truly permanent there. In all likelihood, exceptions prove the rule, but in all likelihood, you won't get a permanent residence permit and certainly not citizenship. Yes, that's clear. There are only a very, very few cases where people have received citizenship there. There are a few billionaires, a few people from other Arab countries. They receive citizenship for special achievements. Normally, as an entrepreneur, even if you live there for 10 or 20 years, you won't get one. Citizenship and even a residence permit, you have to earn or, so to speak, buy them again every time. Yes, that's basically the business model of the Emirates. That's how the real estate market works there. And of course, also these free zones, it has its advantages and disadvantages. Yes, it works. You can renew it every year for a few €1,000, fair enough. On the other hand, of course, it does require a certain amount of effort. In the Republic of Cyprus, as an EU member and as an EU citizen, I'll assume you have an EEA or EU citizenship, you have the option to get a permanent residence permit directly. It's not quite 100% though. But the easy part is that you can get a permanent residence permit, the so-called yellow slip. With this document, you are allowed to stay in Cyprus for as long as you want. You are allowed to run a business. You can work in Cyprus either in your own company or someone else's. And as I said, you can stay as long as you want without any restrictions. And of course, you can also enter the country no matter what happens in the world. So this particular residence permit is a very important and significant status to possess. And the best part is you absolutely do not have to renew it at any point in time. You can, I would say, cement it after 5 years and then make it truly unlimited in time. That's another point. We can discuss that in a one-on-one conversation. But as far as the SE is concerned, it's initially without limitation and without restrictions. So that's a very, very significant difference. It's a one-time appointment. You don't have to, of course, you can start a company, but you don't have to set up a business in Cyprus for this. And as an EU citizen, you also don't have to buy property. It's different for non-EU citizens. And that's a very, very significant advantage. So Cyprus really welcomes you as an EU citizen, and you can stay in Cyprus for as long as you want. A very, very big advantage of Cyprus. So, and now my conclusion. It is, I think you can put it this way, it's never wrong, always an individual decision at the end of the day. And I really recommend you book a consultation. As I said, the link is below the video, and then we can gladly find out together. And I'm really open-minded about the outcome. Whether Cyprus is right for you or whether Dubai is right for you. Or maybe you'd be even better off in a completely different location. Or maybe it's even a combination of both. Or maybe several locations are an option, or a combination of several locations. So you are warmly invited to choose an appointment, and I look forward to our personal conversation. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a like. And please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I'm happy about your subscription, but of course also about your comment. I read and reply to every comment under this video. And I want to thank you very, very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to it, to our upcoming conversation. All the best to you. Take care. See you soon. Yours, Florian Wilk.